It was just another cargo run from the docks. A refrigerated van filled with frozen chicken headed quietly back to Birmingham. The paperwork was clean, the pallets were stacked tight, and to anyone watching, it looked like a standard delivery for the catering trade. But when officers moved in and opened the rear doors, they found far more than food. Hidden beneath layers of frost and packaging, buried deep within the stacks of meat, were over 150 kilos of high-purity cocaine, meticulously vacuum-sealed, cold to the touch, and worth millions on the street. That single stop, seemingly routine, marked the beginning of a far-reaching investigation into one of the UK's most methodical drug operations, a network that moved over a ton of Class A, laundered millions in criminal cash, and nearly pulled off an international export run to Australia. This is the story of the Indian frozen chicken gang, and how their £10 million empire came undone. It was a simple strategy, and that's what made it work. The gang didn't hide their operation in the shadows. They wrapped it in cling film, froze it, and stacked it on pallets marked for food distribution. To the outside world, these were regular consignments of raw poultry moving through the Midlands, the kind that showed up at restaurants, wholesalers, or catering suppliers. But frozen between the layers of shrink wrap and meat, investigators would later discover hundreds of kilos of cocaine. High purity, professionally packed, and destined for streets across the UK. What gave the shipments cover was their ordinariness. Industrial cold chain transport didn't raise questions. Vans were refrigerated, paperwork was in order, everything looked routine. It wasn't just a disguise, it was a system designed to blend in with the everyday movement of food logistics. The gang stored their product at various warehouse locations, including one in Sutton Coldfield, where 225 kilos of cocaine were staged for export to Australia. The scale of that single export plot made clear this wasn't a local operation. It was a network with reach and ambition. Every layer was deliberate, from packaging to delivery, from crate to van. Even trained officers at first glance saw nothing suspicious. The drugs were concealed so expertly they could pass inspection, buried inside legitimate stock under temperature controls that preserved both the meat and the cocaine hidden within it. Police would later describe the concealment as commercial level. And that was the point. This wasn't a backstreet job. It was industrial smuggling dressed up as wholesale food supply, and for months, maybe longer, it worked exactly as planned. Until the day one of those shipments was stopped and the frozen cover began to melt. They didn't dress like criminals. No flashy cars, no loud cash, no digital trails of excess. They blended in, quiet professionals scattered across the West Midlands and London, all tied to a supply chain that moved over a ton of cocaine and generated more than £10 million in drug money. At the top sat Maninder Dosanjh, a 39-year-old from Cheslin Hay. To neighbours, he was reserved. To police, he would later be identified as the coordinator, the man who oversaw how cocaine moved, who handled it, and where it went. He wasn't loud or reckless, he was measured, strategic, and the frozen chicken was his perfect cover. Supporting him was Amandeep Rishi, 42, from Birmingham. He managed logistics, movement, and the quiet coordination of products through the Midlands and beyond. Like Dosanjh, he stayed out of view. No need for flash, just results. The network stretched further. Mohammed Usman from Oldbury acted as a courier for cash. His runs were frequent and quiet, moving through the West Midlands and into London. There, contacts like Saeed Hashemian helped to hide. There were others in the middle tier, men like Rizwan Ali, Kamran Hussain, and Peter Masih, all embedded within local communities. They didn't need to be enforcers or decision makers. Their role was consistency, receiving shipments, moving products, and never attracting attention. Mandeep Singh and Mitab Hussain assisted in preparation, repacking, and short-range transport, a job that required trust above all. Further back, names like Ashtiaq Ahmed came into play, involved in cash but talked about him later in the video. Each man was a piece in a larger mechanism, no single point of failure, no central hub. It wasn't just a gang, It was a workforce, quiet, disciplined, and until the cracks formed, invisible. So far, we've seen what was their operation and who was behind it. But to fully understand how this empire worked and how it eventually collapsed, we need to look at how they communicated and moved products safely. The gang relied on vehicles fitted with hidden compartments, not crude cutouts or hasty panels, but engineered concealments designed to outsmart routine checks. In one van, the cash was stored inside the tires. In another, a functioning air compressor held banknotes stacked behind metal casings. Every detail was thought through, from the make of the vehicle to the route it traveled. Their strategy was simple: look like they belonged. Movement was calculated to avoid patterns. Drivers changed regularly and routes were rotated. The goal was never speed. It was invisibility. These weren't drug runs in the usual sense. They were disguised as business trips, cross-region deliveries, and routine collections. Each trip carried either cash, cocaine, or instructions, sometimes all three. The fleet also served as a buffer. By placing layers between the drugs and the central figures, the gang insulated its top end. Those running logistics rarely touched the product themselves. Instead, the vans became mobile middlemen, constantly moving, constantly changing hands, never resting long enough in one place to raise alarms. It was industrial trafficking disguised as everyday trade, a mobile supply chain built not just to move drugs, but to do so with the quiet precision of a legitimate business. And for a time, it worked flawlessly. They didn't meet in pubs, they didn't call each other on phones. Instead, they used a platform called EncroChat, and for years it gave criminals across Europe a false sense of security. The gang used it constantly. Messages flowed between handlers, drivers, launderers, and organizers. Locations were shared, loads were logged, and payments were tracked, all behind layers of encryption they believed couldn't be cracked. Each member operated under a code name. EncroChat didn't just help them move drugs, it made them feel untouchable. They could coordinate nationally and internationally, arranging multi-kilo runs across the UK while remaining physically distant from the product. The messages were short, efficient, and cold. Cocaine became a product. Vans were wheels. Thousands in cash were logged like spreadsheets. This digital system allowed the gang to scale. Police would later say the conversations read like those of a business, not a street gang. And in a way, they were right. It was logistics at a high level with built-in deniability. For a while, it worked. EncroChat gave them distance, gave them scale, gave them confidence. But what none of them knew was that by 2020, the system had already been breached. Investigators traced usernames to vehicles, locations, and patterns. Surveillance teams watched quiet estates, warehouse units, and delivery routes. Every movement was logged. Every handoff was tracked. Over weeks, officers mapped the gang's operation in full, from drivers to launderers, pickups to drop-offs. And once the picture was complete, they moved. A van on the move from Essex docks to Birmingham. Nothing unusual at first glance. But officers had been watching and waiting. Inside that van, packed beneath frozen chicken, were over 150 kilos of cocaine. When police pulled it over, the cover was blown. And just like that, the operation began to fold in on itself. From that first stop, everything moved quickly. Within a 10-day window in July 2020, officers from the Regional Organised Crime Unit launched a coordinated takedown across Birmingham, Wolverhampton, Sandwell, Walsall, South Staffordshire, and London. They weren't chasing suspects. They were executing a plan, with names, movements, and locations already mapped out. Dosanjh and Rishi had been caught first. Others were arrested in real time as they moved products or handled cash. Mohammed Usman was picked up mid-run, transporting wheels stuffed with nearly £500,000. The tires were passed off in a residential street to Saeed Hashemian, who was arrested soon after. They didn't see it coming. Properties were searched, vans were seized, compressors were cut open, revealing concealed cash. In one instance, police found over £1 million hidden inside what looked like everyday trade equipment. The operation wasn't dramatic. There were no chases, no last-minute escapes. Most of the men were taken quietly, often while going about their routine. That was the point. They'd built an empire that relied on staying invisible, and when the arrests came, none of them had time to disappear. Every seizure added weight to the case. Physical evidence matched digital trails from EncroChat. The timeline was clear. So were the roles. 10 arrests, all in under 2 weeks. And as investigators dug deeper, one discovery changed the scale of the case entirely. Cocaine, stored and staged for export, waiting in a Midlands warehouse with a different destination in mind. Tucked away inside a Sutton Coldfield warehouse, behind the cover of catering stock and food transport paperwork, officers uncovered something that shifted the entire weight of the case. Stacked in the cold room, stored as if ready for commercial distribution, were 225 kilos of high-purity cocaine, already packaged, already sealed, and already set for export. Destination: Australia. For a UK-based gang, this wasn't typical. Most groups move products regionally, sometimes nationally. But sending Class A across international borders, particularly on a scale like this, meant something else entirely. It pointed to contacts abroad, a new tier of ambition, and a willingness to take on higher risk for even higher returns. Australia's cocaine market, by price, is among the most lucrative in the world. What sold in the UK for thousands could sell overseas for 5 to 6 times more. For this gang, it was the next step in a maturing operation. The Sutton Coldfield stash didn't just add to the weight of the charges. It revealed the scale of what they were building and how close they came to operating as an international syndicate. Their front was frozen chicken, but the vision was far bigger. Moving cocaine at scale was only half the job. The other half was hiding the money. And this gang didn't stack it under floorboards or bury it in gardens. They engineered a system to clean millions without drawing attention. Investigators believe the gang generated over £10 million through their operation. The cash was passed to Saeed Hashemian in London, not through banks or online transfers, but by hand in quiet residential streets. It was an old-school system, modernized with careful concealment and professional coordination. Further back in the chain, smaller players like Ashtiaq Ahmed helped process transactions through personal accounts and fake invoices. These weren't lavish purchases or luxury showpieces. They were quiet, structured, and deliberately forgettable. The aim wasn't to flaunt the money, it was to make it disappear. Cash came in from multiple cities. It was counted, rerouted, and laundered through a web of fake services. Just layers, each designed to shield the next. They didn't just build a supply chain, they built a financial system to match it. On the 20th of August 2020, the 10 men behind one of the UK's most organised smuggling rings stood in the dock at Birmingham Crown Court. What began with frozen chicken had unfolded into something far larger. Over a ton of cocaine, millions in hidden cash, and plans to move product beyond UK shores. Maninder Dosanjh, 39, received the longest sentence, 16 years and 8 months. The court heard how he ran the network like a business, quiet, structured, and deadly efficient. He was also convicted of conspiring to export drugs overseas, tied directly to the Sutton Coldfield warehouse and the 225 kilos marked for Australia. Amandeep Rishi, 42, described as his logistical counterpart, was sentenced to 11 years and 2 months. Mohammed Usman, 29, for moving cash between cities using concealed tyres, received 9 years and 8 months. Rizwan Ali and Kamran Hussain, both 34, were jailed for over 9 years each for their central roles in cocaine distribution and cash handling. Others who played smaller but essential roles in repackaging, movement and laundering were sentenced as Peter Massey, 44, received 8 years. Mandeep Singh, 42, and Meetab Hussain, 31, both jailed for 7 years and 2 months. Ashtiaq Ahmed, 45, 2 years and 7 months for money laundering. Saeed Hashemian, 38, 2 years and 3 months. Also for handling criminal proceeds. In total, the gang received more than 80 years behind bars. Each guilty plea confirmed the scale and coordination of the network. The courtroom was clinical. The case was closed. The empire had fallen. What do you make of the sentencing? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more real UK crime stories like this, no headlines, no hype, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's always another case to uncover.